Hey, I'm Dr. Joey, Autistic Psych, and I thought I'd make a little video to introduce myself and my YouTube, give you a little bit of context as to what I'm doing here, and let you know what to expect from my channel. So I am, as I said, a psychologist. I'm actually a clinical psychologist, and soon I will be a clinical neuropsychologist. I just have to submit my logbooks and have the executive functioning to do that. So I've got to find that somewhere. And I am also autistic, as I mentioned. I am also diagnosed with ADHD. Both of those are formally diagnosed. And I have some other, flavors in my neurodivergent profile, which I'm sure I will get to. So I work predominantly with neurodivergent adults in a therapeutic capacity. I do a lot of assessments, and one of the things I am very fond of is info dumping safely about my interests. So one of my interests being neurodivergence, and I don't know if at this point I would really call that an interest. It's, or maybe more of a passion or something that I'm driven towards, which started out when I went through university and I studied a Bachelor of Psychological Science with first class honours. Then I did a doctorate of clinical and neuropsychology. All of that study took around a bit over 10 years because I had to take a bit of a break because I had some traumas in the psych degree. Surprise, surprise. And so I went through all of that, and no one ever mentioned that I'm autistic. You know, you'd think the field of psychology would pick that up, but no. In fact, no one really even mentioned autism at all, apart from how, there's some troublesome things that can come up when you have an autistic child and you're trying to get them to do what you want them to do. I did have a lot of autistic clients in my clinical placements, but usually they were framed as other things. And I got to the point where life was just not happening for me because I no longer had the structure of my university degree, and I had finished and I had accomplished what I set out to do, and nothing was happening the way I thought it would be. So one day I had a client who had ADHD, and I had started to learn about ADHD because, when I am working with clients in my role as a psychologist, if I don't understand something well, I go and research that and try to know how to work with them effectively. For me, that's just what you need to do. So I looked into ADHD and I found this video about neurodiversity. I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool, because I wanted a way in which I could work with them and actually work effectively with them. At the time, I was working at a clinic, which was actually Haven Psychology in Brisbane. And I got to that because I was really interested in supporting people who are trans and gender diverse, because I don't know where this came from, but it just really pissed me off. I'm like, why is that such a big problem that people want to express their gender identity in the way that they want to express it? I didn't really understand at the time, but I think it's probably a reflection of how I feel about neurodiversity as well. So a lot of the clients I had who were gender diverse or trans also had these things. A lot of them weren't diagnosed, but looking back, probably like most of them were neurodivergent as well. So I had this one client, and I'm saying to them, oh, I came across this thing like neurodiversity. Have you thought about how there's some ways in which ADHD might not just be you are really broken and bad, but potentially there's some reasons why people with ADHD continue to kind of be part of the human population. Maybe there's some kind of neural advantages, thinking of my neuropsychology kind of background. I don't know if I said it like that, but I'm kind of trying to say, maybe you're not just like a broken person and we can work with your self-esteem. And then they turned around and said, do you have ADHD? Not in the, well, do you have ADHD? But it was like, do you have ADHD? And I just said, I don't know. I don't know, maybe too honest as a psychologist. And so, I probably shouldn't have done this, but I happen to have access to the validated measures that you would use for ADHD. So of course I did them on myself and looked at all the scores. I also gave myself a personality test. That was interesting. Anyway, I looked at all the scores and I'm like, huh, yeah. And so I was booked in with a psychiatrist not long after that. And I feel like on an emotional level, I did not process that then. I was just like, in this phase of like, wow, it explains everything. Wow, like I make sense of my life and like, it's so great. Like I was like really happy about it or something. And yeah, so I got medicated, and then stuff was continually hard, and I started seeing a neurodivergent psychologist. So I sought them out intentionally because I'm like, well, maybe I don't know, I'm a psychologist, I'm apparently neurodivergent too, and maybe they know what's going on. And yeah, straight away they picked up that I'm into autistic burnout. So from there, that's when everything started to kind of unravel, and to kind of look at the fact that I not only had one, but two types of neurodivergence, that my training and understanding of those was not helpful in regards to supporting myself or supporting others. That was a very big moment of injustice sensitivity for me, and I started making videos about it. So soon after, I don't know when in the timeline, because when you're ADHD, your time thing doesn't really happen. For most ADHDers, temporal processing is along divergent lines for some reason. I have theories. So at some point, all of this kind of hit me, and I was like, you know what I'll do? I'll start telling people, because I would have wanted to know this, and I want other health professionals to know this, because I had seen lots of psychologists at that point, and there were lots of explanations as to what I was struggling with, but none of them were actually what I was struggling with, which was autism and ADHD and some other things that I now understand. And it wasn't long until I got reported to AHPRA. Now, AHPRA is the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, and they regulate health practitioners that are doing the wrong thing. And so somebody, I still don't know who it is, I have my suspicions that it was another psychologist who I consulted and said I could unmask. And obviously I couldn't have, because they reported me to AHPRA, I think. So they weren't happy with me being so open about my experiences of being neurodivergent. And they thought it was inappropriate and a violation of boundaries on my part. And so they made me be supervised by someone who was amazing, and we worked through the fact that there's actually no guidance by AHPRA about how and whether and when to disclose being neurodivergent. There's nothing, and there's very little guidance on social media. So I was being reprimanded by something there's no rules about. And if I had those rules, I would have followed them because I'm autistic. All right. So I've done all that, and I've kind of created my own rules for how to do social media, which I think fits with AHPRA / the APS Code of Ethics, but I guess we'll find out if I get reported again. And that was like probably one of the biggest traumas I've ever experienced. So I survived that, and out of that, I have a kind of deeper appreciation for the challenges that we're facing more broadly, not only within the psychology profession, but in society in regards to being openly neurodivergent. Now, meanwhile, like I'm probably not really doing much at all, but the neurodiversity movement has progressed, and I would say since I started my ragey TikToks, has made substantial progress to the point where from December 2025, psychologists must be aware of neurodivergent conditions. It's now in our competencies. So that means that somehow the universities have to teach that. I don't know how they're going to figure that out. I mean, hit me up if you want some help, but it's to the point now where it's a norm that psychologists must take this into account. And again, the implementation of that, I don't know how that's going to go, but we're at a point now where I think we've done enough work to not be concerned that the dismissal will just be guaranteed. There is a chance for neurodivergent people now in psychology, but I'm starting to become more aware of the depth and complexity of the issues facing neurodivergent people. So through my time, I've now supported a lot of neurodivergent people. Numbers is also not a great thing for ADHDers. I'm just gonna say it's been over 100, probably 1,000, I don't know, a lot. I've met lots of neurodivergent people, particularly adults, and I think we're only just starting to get a sense for the complexities that come with neurodivergent profiles. So not just autism, like there's so much focus on autism and ADHD, but there's so many other things I think we're trying to get our heads around that kind of just, we don't have a way to help people. So neurodivergent trauma, giftedness, learning disorders, possibly some neurodevelopmental differences that people haven't even mapped yet. Like the things that neurodivergent people say to me about how they process information or the things that they struggle with, I'm like, yeah, no one else has ever mentioned that to me, and we don't know what that is. When you think about the fact that in neuroscience, our understanding of the brain and particular cognitive functions, we've mapped maybe half of what the actual functions are that the brain does. It's no surprise that when people's brains might do a function that no one else's brain does, then they're going to really struggle when they're expected to function within neurotypicalism. And neurotypicalism is really just a bias that favors being neurotypical. So as well as this, there seems to be this emerging picture of complex health issues. So multi-systemic health problems that affect neurodivergent people, which is starting to show it's not just neurodivergent. There's some divergencies that are happening within people's nervous systems more broadly, but also, yeah, a range. I'm not in this area, but the kind of intersectionality between the health problems of neurodivergent people and the kind of cognitive problems and the trauma that I'm seeing, we need more work in this area. And then the other thing that I think we need to do more work on, which I'll maybe try to cover sensitively, is when people are also coming with differences in their background. So whether they're like a person of color, or whether they're somebody who is also poor, or whether they're someone who has, you know, a difference in their gender identity. And the fact that understanding neurodivergence might not even cut it for these people, because the merging of their experiences adds dimensionality that the models that we have no longer apply. So I've come from being like naive and, oh, I have ADHD, to now in my role as a psychologist and somewhat of an educator, to, yeah, trying to help contribute to mapping out what I think are things that the mental health field really should have mapped out earlier. And it's through the work of people with lived experience that this is happening now. So yeah, those are the sorts of things that I'll talk about or try to. And I'm also really interested in pathological demand avoidance and giftedness. So, and I like to kind of break down literature and kind of like make that digestible to people. I also like talking about philosophy and like random theories that come into my mind because I have no other outlet. Okay, so I'm doing this because TikTok might be banned, but even if it isn't, I think long form is more suitable to kind of give what's needed to these topics. and I hope that you stick around for it. Okay, thank you.